Hello, everyone. My name is Mathis. I'm a current intern at the Human Rights Measurement Initiative, HERMI. At HERMI, we measure what matters because we believe that in today's world, only what gets measured gets improved. Therefore, we have developed the HERMI Human Rights Tracker, a unique tool to systematically track the human rights performances of countries. Sounds complicated? I'll walk you through, so that you can find and understand the data that fits your research and advocacy project. So how does it work? You go to rightstracker.org and select one of the five languages that we have: English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, or Chinese. Once you have selected the language of your choice, you can search for three different categories. With data from over 200 countries, from more than 30 people groups, such as journalists, and from 13 different rights, which are divided into quality of life rights, such as the right to education and right to food, 5 safety from the state rights, such as the right from freedom of arbitrary arrest, and 3 empowerment rights, such as the right to opinion and expression. So let's get started. In the search button, you type in one of these types of categories that I just explained, and I'll go for Jordan. And now let's dive into the human rights performance of Jordan. The overall human rights performance of Jordan or any other country is reflected by the HERMI score, which is a score from 0 to 100% for social and economic rights, or from 0 to 10 for political rights. The latter being the maximum achievable human rights score for a country based on its GDP. Here it's important to point out that the 100% or the 10 are not a nice to have, but an expected goal. Moreover, countries have an obligation under international law to use their available resources to enhance human rights domestically. So now we're at a glance tab, and here you see the country's overall performance of up to 13 human rights divided into the previously explained categories. And the average score for each of these categories is reflected by the category score, for example, here. And for economic and social rights, such as quality of life rights, we combine data from international databases, which each country's level of income to produce a score. And the score is expressed as a percentage to show how well a country is using its resources to produce good human rights outcomes. And every country should be able to get near its 100% income adjusted target by improving policies and practices even without more money at the same level of GDP. So for quality of life rights, Jordan performs with 85.9% of what it could be doing at its level of income. For political rights, such as safety from the state rights or empowerment rights, we calculate these scores through expert surveys that we regularly run with local human rights experts. So for safety from the state rights, Jordan has a score of 6.3, whereas it could achieve a score out of 10 with its current GDP. And for empowerment rights, it performs relatively weakly with a score of 3.4. And below here, you can see a written summary of what you've seen in the graphs before. So regarding quality of life and the safety from the state rights, you can see that Jordan performs close to average compared to other countries in its region, whereas for empowerment rights, Jordan performs worse than average compared to other countries in the region. So now let's dive into each of these categories more specifically by using the tabs up here. So first of all, quality of life. Here you see how it's divided into different sub-rights: education, food, health, housing, work. And if you scroll down, you can see these rights, how these rights are divided more in detail. So for example, for education, you can see the human rights score for Jordan's primary education or secondary education, or also based on sex. So how Jordan performs regarding female or male the right to education regarding the sexes. And if you go further down, you also see the developments over time. So right now you see it for the quality of life, so for the category as a whole. We can also click on the right to education, which makes it a bit more specific. And you can see that it's slowly declining over time. And if you want to see it more specifically, we can, for example, click on secondary education. And here you also see that Jordan's human rights performance is unfortunately declining over time regarding this specific right. And if you want to, you can use the switch view that you see up here to have a better contextualization. So you can, for example, compare the data based on the high income country standards, see that it changes, or on low income standards. And if you want to dive more into a specific right and see how this right, how Jordan compares to other countries in this right, you just click on the right, for example, education, and click on explore right to education for all countries. And now you see we have a lot of data from over 160 countries. And to make it more comprehensible, or if you, for example, just want to see how Jordan performs within its region, use the filter, for example, for Middle East and Africa. And here you see that Jordan is performing relatively weak, even within its region, just reaching 63.6% of what it could reach in the right to education, only slightly better than Kuwait and Djibouti. Now let's go to the next tab, to the safety from state rights. And here for all the scores, as I told you before, these scores are calculated through expert surveys. And here you see a range around the scores. And this range, for example, here, plus minus 1.1 or 1.2, are used as a transparency measure based on the degree of certainty of the data collection and reporting process. So here you can see that Jordan performed particularly weak regarding the arbitrary arrests and the torture and ill treatment, but particularly good regarding the freedom from the death penalty. And if you scroll down, you can see these trends again over time. And you see for the freedom of arbitrary arrest that Jordan's performance is worsening over time, unfortunately. Whereas for the freedom from the death penalty, Jordan is doing relatively good throughout the past years. Let's go to the next step, the empowerment rights. Jordan's overall performance is reflected by the 3.4 score out of 10, which is relatively weak, as we have said before. And this score reflects all the scores from the specific empowerment scores, as you can see here. And this shows that Jordan is doing particularly bad regarding the right of opinion and expression, as you can see here. And Jordan's empowerment score of 3.4 suggests that many people are not enjoying the civil liberties and political freedoms, such as the freedom of speech, assembly and association, or democracy rights. And compared to other countries in our sample, Jordan is performing worse than average, as you can see here in the score. And if we go again to the trends, you can see that Jordan's performance on the right to assembly and association worsened over time in the past years, and even more so for the right to opinion and expression. And Jordan's performance regarding the right to participate in the government has been relatively stable over time. Now, one may say that this data is nice, but aren't human rights violations often executed towards or disproportionately executed among different groups within the society? And yes, that's often true. And to account for this uneven distribution, we have the People at Risk tab. And through the People at Risk tab, you can see at one glance, according to local human rights experts, which group of people are particularly prone to suffering human rights violations in Jordan. And let's have a look, for example, at the right to food in Jordan. And according to local human rights experts, migrants and immigrants, as well as refugees and asylum seekers, you can see here, are particularly prone to suffer from violations regarding the right to food. And to clarify what this means, for example, here for migrants and immigrants, it's not 33% of migrants and immigrants who are at risk, but it's 33% of experts saying that this group is at risk of human rights or of this specific human rights violation. And the larger the text, as you can see here, the more human rights experts identified this group as being at risk. And this data is particularly useful for individuals, organizations who seek to advance the rights of specific groups within a given society. And yeah, if you want, you can also highlight certain groups within this category. For example, let's go to children. So now you can see to what extent children are being said to suffer from different human rights violations. And you can see how the category children is always highlighted. So for example, 8% of our human rights experts identified children as being at risk of having the right to education violated. And yeah, it's actually the same number for the right to food. And as I mentioned before, the data is gained through a multilingual expert survey approach to get our information directly from the human rights experts who are monitoring events in each country. And all our data is freely accessible and can be downloaded on our website. As you can see here, download PDF. Now it's time for you to find the Hermi data that fits your purpose towards the improvement of human rights.